margin up there for consumables as well as utilization. That's going to be a challenge for the entire community, and no one provider is going to be able to do what is needed to keep the space station flying. We at Orbital, and I'm sure SpaceX agrees, are strong proponents of keeping the station flying as long as it's a viable platform, as long as it keeps an American presence in space and allows us to continue doing the research up there that will support us going beyond low Earth orbit. And I think it will do that for many, many years to come. We don't know for sure it'll be available beyond 2015, though. And, you know, one of the things that I think we need to think about as we come together at our routine meetings where we talk to each other is about sometimes the same old things, but sometimes not, is why do we do this? Why do we get together and talk about this? Why do we talk about what we're already doing? And why do we talk about the plans that we know everybody already has? And that's because we need to encourage each other to keep this moving. I think one of the most important things we need to identify as a community is what are the obstacles to continuing this mission, not just this mission on the space station, but the American mission of leaving Earth, going into low Earth orbit, staying there permanently, and going beyond that because we know how to stay there permanently. What are the obstacles to doing that? Each of us has our own view of that. We have internal obstacles in each company, we have obstacles internal to our community, and we have external obstacles that we have to overcome all the time. I see a number of folks from Capitol Hill in here, and I don't consider that hill an obstacle necessarily, but it is a challenge, and it's important that we all communicate very well about what those obstacles are and how we can overcome them. It's not just money, and it's not just votes. It's people making the right decisions to do the right thing with the resources and the treasure that we have in this country. That treasure includes not only the money that we invest in this, but it is the human capital, as was said earlier, that goes into keeping this flying. And it's the human capital that's talented, qualified, and able to keep it going. So the type of work that we're doing on the commercial side to try to inspire people to be involved in this and to go to school to learn to be aerospace engineers and all other engineering disciplines, because it takes all of them to make all this happen, is very, very important. And it's not going to be just the government that keeps it going. The government's a major player, and we cannot ever minimize or disregard the impact that government has had on our ability to do this. But we have got to have the ability to not only invest the government's money wisely, but invest businesses' money wisely, and then have the people that can keep making it happen. A part of that human capital is the leadership. You all in this room, for the large part, are the leadership that will inspire those people to come into this business, stay in this business, and then do the things that we know will keep it going. So please think about how you best can motivate the folks to stay with this and not give up on it. I was sitting next to a friend of mine from JSC last night after I spoke, and we'd known each other for many years and each other's kids, and I asked her how the family was doing, and she said, well, her daughter was headed to Texas A&M, and I said, what's she going to major in? And she said, well, I had to advise her to go to mechanical engineering because I wasn't sure about the future of the aerospace business. And I said, well, we need a lot of those, and we hire a lot of those, and we can convert them, but do not ever give up on the aerospace industry. That is what this country does really, really well when we put our minds to it and our best people on it. But don't ever disregard what we can do if we stay focused on it. We've got to avoid false starts. We've got to avoid setting goals for ourselves that exceed our reach too far. We always have to kind of exceed our reach. But if we set a goal that doesn't have a lot of reachable intermediate goals, such as expanding our capability on the space station, increasing the commercial involvement of providing not only cargo but crew, and increasing the commercial involvement in reaching higher orbits, going to places in between here and the moon, and eventually getting to the moon and beyond, whatever the country decides. But we've got to do it incrementally in ways that are achievable and that we can show feedback that we're meeting the milestones, not just that we're building something really big and we know it's going to go to the moon someday. And I believe in what we're doing to go to the moon. I think Orion was well conceived, extremely underfunded, and it's going to be very difficult for us to get back on a track that allows us to meet milestones and keep people going into space. I probably exceeded my time. Patty's being very kind, not tugging on my sleeve, but I'm looking forward to your questions and continuing this discussion. I think we are the ones who will help keep that in orbit, keep it staffed for a long, long time, but also allow us to go way, way beyond that. Thank you very much.
Please join me again in a great round of applause for what has been excellent. We promised you some time for questions, and I'm going to take a liberty and lead off with the first question, so get your questions ready. And this is a question for each panelist. I'd ask you to be brief, Mike, in responding to the question. Assume an options paper that after the Augustine Commission finishes its work, goes to the President's desk. What are two must-haves from your perspective that must be included on that list? Starting with you, Mike.
Beyond a bailout. Beyond a bailout from Mike Gold, I don't know what else. Yeah. Well, I'm loud enough to do without. Hello? Testing? There we go. All right. Can everyone hear me? Two options. Well, I can tell you what one of them certainly would be, and that is to include funding, sufficient funding, for commercial crew to LEO. We don't have it now. I think you heard excellent presentations from two of the leading contenders today, and that must be included. Again, we have nothing against Ares Orion per se or any of the other government programs, but as we look to history, failure has not just been an option, but a virtual certainty, usually because of budgetary concerns. And I think it's very important to leverage off of something that Frank said, that we not overreach, not just technologically, but budgetarily. Budgets are going down. I'm not Nostradamus, but I can assure you of that. And we need to make sure that whatever request or program goes before the Congress and is part of that recommendation, that it's budgetarily viable. So if I can make three requests of the President: one, that they support commercial crew to LEO. Two, that whatever else is done is realistic budgetarily, and not only is realistic, but if there are budget cuts, can still survive. And three, that we have a second crude commercial option. And we love SpaceX. We have a lot in common with them as a company. But frankly, 1 equals 0 in this case. We need to, and again, I think the gentleman next to me has some excellent options. So not brief, but I'll cut off there.
Thank you. George?
We briefed the Augustine panel yesterday. This is on or not. The top two options we told them that we think they ought to look at. We agree with Mike Gold that commercial crew ought to be an option. And actually we're fairly hopeful that it is. The third element of Augustine panel charter was look for ways to stimulate commercial space opportunities. The other option we think they ought to consider is using EELV for some of the exploration launch, and we offered up Delta IV Heavy as an alternative launcher for Orion. And the idea here is very simple: can the nation afford a unique civil and military launch infrastructure? We're saddled with if you take that on, and that's certainly possible to do. You have to recognize that a large space infrastructure is a year-over-year budgetary lean on, in this case, NASA's budget. And we've been struggling with that with the space shuttle for all these years. If we go the Ares route this time, we'll be saddled with that for decades to come. And so we think it's definitely worth considering to try and develop some synergy between our military space program and our civil space program and enable things that you couldn't do otherwise.
Thank you. Max?
Well, yes, I'd have to echo Mike and George that, I spent years designing hardware for commercial systems, for spacecraft systems, and how frustrating it would be when you develop a good plan. It's got requirements, it's got costs, it's got schedules. You've done the whole thing, you go through a review, and the managers look at it and say, cut 20% out of your budget. And you say, well,